Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the Hindu analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen these 6 important articles for a detailed analysis. So let's take up these articles one by one and ensure that we carry out a comprehensive analysis so that you don't have to go back and read the newspapers again. If you guys are liking these initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So we have 2 articles essentially which are very important for your mains and as well as for your prelims, and few other smaller articles which are particularly relevant for the prelims exam. So before we start, we have a very important announcement. As the Holi festival is coming up, we are offering you a flat 50% discount on our IAS courses along with a 6-month free extension. So please make use of the offer because today is the last date for this offer. You can use the offer to enroll for our English online classroom program which has recently started. Along with this, let me wish everyone a very happy Holi, and let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu by looking at this important article from page number 1 and 9. There was a devastating development reported from Russia. In Moscow, there has been a deadly terror attack where more than 140 people have been killed by a terrorist outfit known as ISIS-K or Islamic State Khorasan Province. This terrorist group affiliated with Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack that took place in Moscow. Now, this topic is very, very important under international relations and also under internal security. So let's look at the developments first, and then we will carefully examine this topic in detail. Now, some of you might be wondering, how is this topic relevant for our exams? Let me tell you that ISIS-K operates in India's neighborhood. ISIS-K has posed a threat to Indian interests, and as a result, this terrorist outfit is of great concern for India. India's intelligence and security agencies, they keep a close watch on the activities of Islamic State, particularly this branch called ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan. Hence, the topic is very important for the exam. So first, let's look at the context. This deadly terror attack, it took place at a concert hall which is located on the outskirts of Moscow. So there was a rock concert organized at the Crocus City Hall, which is a very popular concert venue in Moscow. And a popular Russian rock band called as Picnic was supposed to perform over here. So thousands of people had accumulated at this concert hall, which is located at a certain distance from the Kremlin, from the Red Square of Moscow. So this is where multiple armed terrorists, they stormed the concert hall, opened indiscriminate firing against innocent civilians, and they have killed at least more than 140 Russians. So this happens to be one of Russia's most deadliest terror attack. In a way, it bears resemblance with India's own experience during the 26/11 Mumbai attacks, where a commando-style raid was carried out by armed terrorists who ran free around the city targeting civilians in a classic case of urban terrorism. So Russia has been experiencing something similar, and Russia has not been free from terrorism and insurgency as well. In the past, there have been such similar attacks by few related terrorist outfits. In fact, few concert halls in particular in Russia have been targeted in the past as well. But this happens to be one of the deadliest attacks that Russia has witnessed, and it raises some very disturbing concerns for all the countries present in the region, including Russia and as well as for India. So this terrorist attack has been claimed by this outfit called Islamic State Khorasan or ISIS Khorasan, also known as ISIL Khorasan. Sometimes it's abbreviated as ISIS-KP as well. So it all refers to the same terrorist outfit. So it's a branch of Islamic State that operates in eastern Afghanistan. I'm sure all of you would have heard about the Islamic State. It's a notorious terrorist outfit that rose to prominence in 2014 by capturing territory in the Syria and Iraq region. the main branch of ISIS rose to prominence over here in 2014. So it's called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, also known as ISIL or Islamic State in the Levant region. Levant is this region in West Asia that includes parts of Iraq, Syria, even Jordan and Israel. This whole geographical area in West Asia is called the Levant. So this terrorist outfit that proclaimed the establishment of a so-called Islamic State called itself as ISIS or ISIL, and in Arabic it's also called as Daesh. The goal of this terrorist outfit was primarily to establish a so-called Islamic Caliphate and enforce its rigid conservative laws. It was known for its brutality. It was known for its extreme violence that it committed in the region. And more importantly, this was one terrorist outfit which leveraged the power of the internet and social media. It primarily spread its propaganda through Facebook, Telegram, WeChat, and many other online platforms. And very quickly, it gained a global following. Several radical extremist elements from around the world, from countries around the world, they got self-radicalized, they got self-indoctrinated by receiving the propaganda material through online platforms. And many of them even went to Iraq and Syria to fight for the Islamic State. From India, from European countries, from Maldives, from Indonesia, Philippines, Australia, US, from almost every country in the world, several radical extremists who fell for this ideology of Islamic State, they even traveled to these countries to join the ISIS and to fight for the so-called Islamic Caliphate. So as the popularity of this group started rising in 2014, its ideology became very influential, and several branches came up, several regional affiliates of ISIS came up across Africa, West Asia, and even in Afghanistan. Different branches of Islamic State came up, and they all claim allegiance to this main organization, which is Islamic State. Today, ISIS has been weakened considerably because at one point, the main ISIS branch in Iraq and Syria, it had captured a large territory in Iraq and Syria, which was almost as large as Great Britain. It even controlled oil fields, and it had become one of the richest terrorist outfits in the world. But following the counterattacks by US and even by Russia, right? Both US and Russia, with the help of their allies, they targeted Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, and today the ISIS has largely been neutralized in the region. It's been pushed into a very small corner in Iraq and Syria, and the so-called caliphate doesn't exist anymore. And also its founding leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was assassinated by American forces. So the main branch of ISIS has been largely subdued, but there are different regional affiliates which are still very strong and operating very frequently. And one such branch is ISIS-K, Islamic State Khorasan, that continues its operations along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Now, how do we know that this attack in Moscow was carried out by Islamic State? This was claimed by ISIS-K themselves. There is a media outlet called Embark News Agency. You can make a note of this for prelims. This is considered as a media outlet of Islamic State. It's proscribed as a terrorist organization, right? Just like Islamic State itself is proscribed by every country as a terrorist outfit, its media arm, the Embark News Agency, is also banned as a terrorist organization. It is seen as the media outlet or the PR branch of Islamic State. So whenever these attacks happen, Embark News Agency claims these attacks, and that's how you get an indication that this outfit might have carried out the attack. And also there are various social media handles affiliated with ISIS and its branches. On Telegram and on many other applications, there are several handles which are still active that propagate ISIS material and propaganda radical ideology. And they have also claimed the attack, indicating that ISIS-K would most definitely have carried out this attack. Also, we have received confirmation from US intelligence agencies. US intelligence agencies have informed media outlets that they have credible intelligence to indicate that this deadly attack was indeed carried out by ISIS-K. But however, Russia has a different story to tell us. As you know, things have been very interesting between Russia and Ukraine. and Russian President Putin immediately condemned the attack, this barbaric attack, and he indicated that the attackers were trying to run towards Ukraine. In fact, several other Russian leaders, Russian officials and politicians also have made similar statements trying to pin the blame on Ukraine, and they're alleging in an indirect way that these terrorists were in some way sponsored by Ukraine. But Ukraine has completely denied all these allegations, and Ukraine has said that this is just another set of lies that Russia is propagating just to accelerate the war against Ukraine. When these claims are not verifiable, because again it could just be part of Russian propaganda against Ukraine, right? What is at least known as of now is that ISIS social media outlets have indeed claimed the attack, and there is credible intelligence available with Western agencies that points the attack towards ISIS-K. So most analysts agree that this deadly attack was indeed carried out by ISIS-K. Now the big question is, what exactly is ISIS-K? What is their agenda? What is their objective? Where does it operate? What kind of threat does it pose to India? Right? And why specifically are they targeting Russia? Usually you wouldn't have heard much about terror attacks in Russia, right? So these are the basic points that you need to understand in order to answer any question, be it in prelims or mains, related to this topic. So as I told you, ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan is a regional branch of Islamic State that primarily operates in eastern Afghanistan. This branch rose to prominence in 2014, parallel to the rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. When the main ISIS branch was established in Iraq and Syria, and a so-called caliphate was declared by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, almost parallelly, this regional branch in Afghanistan came up and pledged its allegiance to the main ISIS branch. So since then, it's almost been a decade. Since then, it has posed a credible security threat in this region. The term Khorasan that you see here, it refers to an ancient Islamic caliphate that existed in this region of Central Asia and South Asia. Several centuries ago, there was supposed to be an Islamic caliphate that existed here, essentially an Islamic state or a kingdom, that stretched across parts of Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Turkmenistan. Can you see the map over here? So, in parts of today's Iran, Afghanistan, especially southern and eastern Afghanistan, parts of Pakistan as well, and towards the Hindu Kush mountain ranges, and towards Central Asia, including Turkmenistan. Essentially next to Caspian Sea, and it essentially covers parts of Central Asia and South Asia. So this region historically was referred to as the Khorasan region, which was an ancient Islamic caliphate that existed. So the agenda of these terrorists who are now operating from eastern Afghanistan is primarily to topple the governments present here, to throw out the Afghan government or Pakistani government, even Iranian government, and Turkmenistan, and sometimes they even claim to focus on India as well. According to intelligence reports, ISIS-K has a separate branch to focus on India called the Al-Hind or Hind branch, meaning they are focusing on India as well. This is where the concerns come up for India. So this outfit is opposed to even the Taliban. The Taliban, which currently has captured power in Afghanistan and formed a government, right? So ISIS-K opposes the Taliban as well. So obviously it will oppose a Shia Iran, because this is a radical Sunni extremist outfit, and it wants to create this so-called Khorasan caliphate and topple the regimes and governments present over here. So it has been using large-scale violence in the region. It has been responsible for some major terror attacks in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border areas. So this is something you should know about Islamic State. This is the region where it operates. This is the primary focus area, Afghanistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, and Pakistan. And it wants to expand its ambit. It wants to focus on other parts of Central Asia, including some parts of South Asia that stretches across India. There are few ISIS-K maps that have been published, right, where they claim to extend the Khorasan region covering India as well, the subcontinent as well. As I told you, there have been intelligence reports from Indian and Western intelligence agencies which show that They have a separate Al-Hind or a Hind branch to just focus on their Indian operations. So this is where the threat emerges for India. Now, this terrorist outfit has carried out some brutal attacks in the past, and some of them have been of great concern for India. For example, in 2021, when Taliban had toppled the Afghan government, the Afghan civilian government had been thrown out by Taliban after the US forces quit the country. Because in 2020, Donald Trump had negotiated a peace deal with Taliban, and a US-Taliban peace deal had been struck, following which the US forces withdrew from the country in 2021. So as the US forces exited Afghanistan, it gave a free hand for Taliban to run over the country, and Taliban toppled the then Afghan government and captured power in the country. Many of you might remember those challenging days where every country was busy carrying out an evacuation of their citizens and their diplomats from Afghanistan International Airport. So when the evacuation was going on at Kabul International Airport, there was a deadly attack that was carried out. Even India had carried out an evacuation mission to pull out Indian diplomats and citizens and our Afghan friends who were stuck in Afghanistan. This Indian mission was called Operation Devi Shakti. Under Operation Devi Shakti, Indian Air Force pulled out all the Indian citizens and diplomats who were remaining in Kabul and in other parts of the country. So while all the countries were carrying out these evacuations from Kabul International Airport, there was a devastating attack that killed many people, right? And this attack was carried out by ISIS-K. Then more importantly, in 2020, there was an attack on a Sikh Gurudwara in Kabul. I hope you know that there are religious minorities in Afghanistan, from Buddhists to Sikhs, a few Hindus as well. So this radical terror group has been targeting religious minorities. It targets other Muslims as well who don't abide with its radical ideology, right? This is purely a misinterpreted version of religion. Religion has nothing to do with this. Any extremist outfit for that matter, right? They twist their own faith, give it a wrong interpretation, and in the name of faith, they target other religions, right? Including people of their own religion as well. So there was one deadly attack on the Sikh minorities in Kabul, where a Gurudwara was targeted in 2020, which was carried out by this terror outfit. Now, this is where the concern comes up for India. Because in this terror attack, apparently there were few Indians who were involved. A few radicalized Indian youth, particularly from Kerala and few other parts of India, they had been radicalized by Islamic State's ideology on the internet. They gave up their life in India, traveled to Afghanistan, settled in Afghanistan to join ISIS-K. So Indian agencies have credible information that few Indians have indeed joined Islamic State. And this terror attack that happened against a Gurudwara was of direct concern for India. Because one, the Sikh minority was targeted, and second, there were Indians, radicalized Indians who were part of the terrorist outfit who were involved in the planning and the execution of this Gurudwara attack. So in fact, this was one of the reasons why the NIA Act was amended by India. The National Investigation Agency Act, right? NIA was established in 2009 through this particular act after the Mumbai attacks, after the 26/11 attacks. But in 2020, this law was amended by India because NIA needed foreign jurisdiction to investigate some attacks happening in foreign countries as well. See, under the initial version of the act, the NIA had all India jurisdiction. Any terror attack in the country will come under the jurisdiction of NIA. NIA can take over any terror case and it can enforce the laws against terrorism across India. For example, if you look at the latest blast in Bangalore, right? Bangalore police were investigating, but NIA can step in and take over the case entirely. So be it an attack by Northeast insurgent outfits, Khalistani outfits or Naxals or even Kashmir-based outfits or Pakistan-based outfits, any terrorist incident in the country can be investigated by NIA. That is the kind of jurisdiction it has been provided with. It has all India jurisdiction. It does not have to ask permission from the states. It need not get approval from state governments, right? It can invoke the powers of the NIA Act, and MHA can order the NIA to take over any case, any terrorist case in the country. But there were few incidents that happened in 2019 and 2020 where there was a foreign involvement in few terror attacks. For example, in 2019, there was a deadly attack in Sri Lanka called the Easter Sunday bombings. It was carried out by a Sri Lankan terrorist outfit, which again was affiliated with Islamic State. A Sri Lankan local terrorist group called National Tawheed Jamaat or NTJ carried out this deadly attack targeting multiple churches on Easter Sunday. So this Sri Lankan terror group was linked with Islamic State. It affiliated with ISIS and pledged that the attack was carried out in the name of ISIS. Now, for India, NTJ was a concern because some of the NTJ terrorists from Sri Lanka, they were frequently traveling to India, to Tamil Nadu and Kerala, where they were getting some local support. India had even passed on the intelligence to Sri Lanka about an upcoming attack. But Sri Lankan authorities failed to prevent the attack. And following this, India was very interested to investigate NTJ and its involvement and the local support it had in India. And immediately after that, we had the Gurdwara attack in Kabul, where few Indian terrorists were involved with ISIS-K. So NIA again wanted to be a part of the investigation. So NIA's jurisdiction was expanded following this amendment, and today NIA can have foreign jurisdiction. Of course, the foreign country has to give permission in that case. But if there is an attack anywhere in the world, and if it's of concern for India, if there is any Indian link, and if India wants to investigate, we can approach the country diplomatically, ask for their permission, and NIA can register a case and investigate attacks happening in other countries as well. This is very similar to how FBI of the US has been given foreign jurisdiction. For example, some of you might remember, after the Mumbai attacks, the FBI wanted to be a part of the investigation because the Lashkar terrorists who attacked Mumbai in 2008, they specifically targeted Americans and Western citizens. So FBI wanted to join the investigation. It took India's permission, and FBI also was part of the investigation of the Mumbai attacks. So similarly, NIA got foreign jurisdiction following this amendment, and it was because of these two attacks linked with Islamic State. One attack in Sri Lanka in 2019 and ISIS-K attack against a Gurdwara in Kabul in 2020. So there is a direct link that exists over here. And India is deeply concerned about the connections that ISIS-K has in the region. In the AFPAK region, which has been a hub of radicalism and terrorism, there are multiple terrorist outfits that thrive over here. And ISIS-K has connections with many other terrorist groups, especially with Haqqani network, and as well as with Tehreek-e-Taliban, the TTP, which is seen as the Pakistan branch of Taliban. So this is what worries India, because Haqqani network, which has been a faction of the Taliban, has been involved in carrying out attacks against Indian interests in Afghanistan. Pakistan's ISI, Pakistan's intelligence agency, is known to be very close to Haqqani network. It has often used Haqqani network to target Indian presence in Afghanistan. In the past, there have been suicide bombings targeting the Indian embassy in Kabul. Indian consulates in Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif and Kandahar have been targeted by this terrorist outfit. So Indian diplomats and Indian officers have been killed in these attacks. It has even targeted Indian projects and Indian workers who were executing projects in Afghanistan. So Haqqani network remains a threat for India, and some of these outfits operating here, they are connected with ISIS-K. You might have also heard about Indian Mujahideen, which was an India-based terror group supported by Pakistan. India neutralized this terror group. Today, Indian Mujahideen doesn't exist anymore. But some of the Indian Mujahideen terrorists who ran away from India, they took shelter in AFPAK region, and some of them reportedly have joined ISIS-K. So there is this Indian connection which bothers India, worries India, and that is why India closely observes and monitors the activities of this terrorist outfit. Now, the next big question: why did the group attack Russia all of a sudden? As I told you, many of you may not even have heard about terror attacks happening in Russia, right? But trust me, Russia has been a victim of terrorism. Since many years, Russia has been targeted by terrorist outfits, and it even has an insurgent movement going on in a particular part of Russia. So there is a certain reason why ISIS has targeted Russia. This terrorist outfit as we discussed, has influence across Central Asia. There are few radical organizations operating in Central Asia that are linked with these other groups in AFPAC region. And Russia has been accused of targeting and oppressing the Muslim community in the Caucasus region. I will show you a map right now, a map of Russia, to help you identify the North Caucasus region. It's located in southwestern Russia, towards the Caspian Sea and other Eurasian countries that are present. So there you have a part of Russia called the North Caucasus, where there has been a long-lasting insurgency which has been going on against the state of Russia. Since 1990s, there has been a conflict raging over here in the Caucasus. And especially after Putin came to power, right, the Russian government has been alleged to have targeted and oppressed the Muslim community here and committed large-scale human rights violations against them. So where is this Caucasus region located? Let me show you this in a map. There are places like Chechnya, Dagestan, Ossetia, etc., where Russia has been experiencing insurgency and terrorism from at least 30 to 40 years. So if you observe the map, this is the Caspian Sea here. You can see countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan, etc., which were all part of the former Soviet Republic, right? So this is the southwestern part of Russia. This is the Black Sea here. So this region is your North Caucasus region. All right? So there are places like Chechnya, Dagestan, North Ossetia, and the others, where Russia has been battling a major insurgent and terrorist movement. In fact, many foreign fighters also have joined the movement against the Russian state. The primary reason is, as you know, Russia is a communist country, and inspired by extreme communism, the Russian state, which often projects itself as an atheist state, has been targeting religion on the grounds of radicalism and extremism. So the Muslim community here in the North Caucasus feels oppressed and targeted by the Russian state. And there is a clear religious angle involved here, right? There is a clear ideological angle, as Russia remains a communist authoritarian state and projects itself as an atheist state, a state without any religious affiliations. And this directly results in a conflict with religious conservatives and right-wing fundamentalists that brings Russia into a clash with the people over here. So Russia has been alleged to have committed large-scale human rights violations over here, and there has been a war, an insurgent war raging in the North Caucasus since 1990s. In fact, there have been at least 2 wars in the region between Russian forces and the insurgent terrorist outfits. And also you can't forget the link with the Soviet Union. During Soviet era, in Afghanistan, there were few religious conservatives who were opposed to Russian influence. Even though Afghanistan had a communist government during the Cold War, and even though Afghanistan was under Soviet influence, it had become a more liberal and open society actually under Soviet influence when there was a communist government. Right? In 1960s and 70s, Afghanistan had become a more open, more liberal society, right, under Soviet communist influence. This had angered the religious conservatives in Afghanistan, and this in a way played a role for American involvement in the region during the Cold War. So as Soviet Union feared Afghanistan falling under American influence during the Cold War, USSR carried out an invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. USSR invaded Afghanistan, which was a neighboring country back then, because all the Central Asian countries, they were a part of Soviet Republic. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, which are the current neighboring countries of Afghanistan, they were all part of Soviet Union. So Soviet Union shared a direct border with Afghanistan. So Soviet Union couldn't tolerate any American presence and any rise in influence of radical conservatives and religious fundamentalists. Because Soviet Union was largely inclined towards extreme communism, right, focused on atheism, and it wouldn't tolerate any kind of religious inclination and especially religious conservatism. So some of the conservatives in Afghanistan who are aligning with US to counter Soviet Union, right, created a concern for Soviet Union, and it invaded the country. It toppled the communist government in 1979 and occupied the country throughout 1980s. So during this period, the radical forces here received support from US and Pakistan to raise the Afghan Mujahideen, which targeted the Soviet forces. US, along with some of its allies, they sponsored Pakistan, gave funds and weapons to Pakistan to train and raise the Afghan Mujahideen by radicalizing the Pashtun community to target Soviet forces in the country. This is what led to a civil war in Afghanistan, and eventually Soviet forces were thrown out. It even became one of the reasons for the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. So since then, the AFPAK region has been a hub of radical terrorist activities. This radicalism has spread to Central Asia and Eurasia as well, right, towards the Caucasus region, right? The radical influence has spread, and here Russia has been dealing with an insurgent war in the North Caucasus, in Chechnya, Dagestan, and in other parts of the Caucasus region. So that is where Russia is accused of committing large-scale human rights violations against innocent civilians as well. So it stands accused of targeting the Muslim community, and some of these radical groups operating here, right, they would like to target Russia for this reason. And that's what ISIS has claimed as well. Following the attack, ISIS has started spreading its propaganda that Russia is against the community and Russia has been oppressing them in the Caucasus region, and this could be the possible reason why this deadly attack has taken place. So this obviously brings India and Russia closer. India is also equally concerned about rising radicalism in Afghanistan-Pakistan region and the presence of radical groups in Central Asia and Eurasia. The connections they have is something that worries India, it worries Iran, it worries Russia as well. In the past, we have often collaborated with these countries to counter radicalism, especially the Taliban, which was rising back in 1990s. But what's interesting is that ISIS-K has rivalries with Taliban itself. The Taliban, which is in power today, is targeting ISIS-K, right? So it's a very interesting mix and a complex situation that has developed. And this attack honestly has surprised everyone. No one was expecting ISIS-K to have such a reach into Russia and carry out such a major strike in Moscow. So this is why it's a very big and very important development, and it is of concern to India. It is related to Indian interests. So here I've given a brief history of the Caucasus conflict, which has been going on from 1990s. Just go through this. It's not relevant directly for the exam, but you should just be aware of this. You should know that in the Chechnya Caucasus region, there has been these wars between extremist outfits and the Russian state. And you should know that Russia has been accused of violating human rights, the situation continues even today, right? So this is something you should be aware of. So now let's take up another important article from page number 11 that is very important for polity. This article deals with the topic of vote from home. Election Commission of India has introduced a new voting feature. Just like you can work from home, right? Election Commission has decided to introduce a new feature, a new voting option for few category of voters, which is called vote from home. So let's understand what is this feature, why is it being introduced, whom does it help? That's what we should understand. See, this feature is being introduced during this general election primarily to help those who can't come out to the polling station and cast their vote. For example, those who are disabled, right? Those who are not able to move easily outside of their home. Those who are senior citizens above a certain age limit, right? Because don't forget, elections are being held in the peak summer season in India, where there will be deadly heat waves across the country. So it's not going to be easy to step out, go to the polling booth and cast your vote. And especially for disabled and senior citizens, it is going to be a challenge. So because of difficulty in accessibility, right, many of these voters may not come out and cast their vote. So they may not exercise their franchise. So to ensure that our elections are as inclusive as possible, Election Commission takes up a number of initiatives to ensure that every voter gets an opportunity to cast their vote in the easiest manner possible. That is why polling booths are ensured that they are distributed across the constituency, and most polling booths are within a couple of kilometers from your home. Ensuring that shorter distance is also crucial, and this takes immense planning and logistical arrangements to ensure that there are so many polling booths across the country. But even these polling booths, which are close by to almost every home, may not be accessible for senior citizens and for disabled people. So to specifically help them to cast their vote from their home itself, from the comfort of their home, vote from home feature is being introduced this time. Is that clear? This is the first time that it's being extended in general elections for senior citizens and as well as for the disabled community. So there are more than 8 million senior citizen voters. There are more than 8 million disabled voters in the country. So that is a very, very big chunk. And they can all cast their votes through the vote from home option, which is part of the postal ballot system. So let's understand a little more about this. How does it work? What is its goal? What are the issues and challenges in implementing it? So that essentially covers this whole topic. The reason why the initiative is being taken up is to ensure that our elections are inclusive, to ensure that no voter is left behind. Every voter should get a chance, irrespective of their challenges, right? It could be physical challenges or because of their location, because of lack of connectivity, right? There are cases where electoral officials have set up polling booths in remote islands, in remote hilly forest areas to ensure that even one single person is not left out. So we can't leave out 8 million plus senior citizens who are above the age of 85. We can't leave out disabled voters. Again, the number is quite high at 8 million plus. So Election Commission has been taking this initiative to ensure that our elections are as inclusive as possible. It's an attempt to make our elections disabled friendly and senior citizen friendly. In fact, our polling booths were already given a lot of facilities to make them friendly with regard to disabled voters and senior citizens. If you've been to a polling booth, you would have noticed that most polling booths will have these ramps where wheelchairs can be taken up. They will have separate queues for senior citizens and disabled voters. Wheelchair facilities and separate parking facilities are also created by Election Commission in most of the polling booths. But these measures are not enough. They are not sufficient. What if someone has a crippling disability which doesn't allow them to step out of their home? What if there is a voter who is 86, 88, 90 years old? You can't expect them to come to the polling booth and cast their vote, right? Because of their health, because of their condition, it would be very difficult and almost impossible for them to cast their vote. So that is why the Election Commission is reaching out to them directly, right to their doorstep. So through the postal ballot home voting facility, this entire community can now cast their vote easily. So let us see how the process will work and who is eligible, right? There are certain criteria laid down to define the eligibility. There is a certain process to be followed. And also this actually is an awareness for you. Let's say there are senior citizens in your home, disabled voters. You can make them aware of the facility available and ensure that they are registered accordingly, right? Then the Election Commission will come to your home directly. They'll bring the polling booth to your home, allowing them to cast their vote at the comfort of their home. So let's look at the eligibility criteria. So first, there is a list of specified disabilities. You can find this on the website of the Election Commission. A list of disabilities are specified and there is a certain threshold, a benchmark, which has been set. So out of these specified disabilities, if someone is suffering more than 40% disability, that is not less than 40% disability, and if it is certified by a concerned authority, by concerned doctors and medical experts, the disabled people will have the disability certificate issued by the concerned authorities. So those who have the disability certificate with them, which shows that they're suffering from more than 40% disability with regard to the specified list of disabilities, they are eligible for this facility. Understood? Then senior citizens above the age of 85 years. Any senior citizen above the age of 85 years, they would also be eligible, right? As I told you, accessing the polling booth is difficult for them. The summer will be oppressive during the months of April and May when the elections are being held. Large parts of India will be under heat wave conditions. So it might be very difficult for them to cast their vote. So that is why this special feature is being provided to them. But however, this is not the first time that vote from home is being experimented with. It has been tried out before in certain assembly elections in few constituencies as a pilot project. In some of the recent assembly elections that were held, Election Commission had tried out this experiment on a pilot basis. So vote from home is not an entirely new concept. Maybe for general elections, it's being introduced for the first time, right? But in previous assembly elections recently, in some constituencies, the feature was tried out by the Election Commission, and it was a big success. So the age limit, which was previously set at 80 during the pilot stage, has now been increased to 85 years. The upper age limit has been increased, and it has been extended to journalists, because we have something called the postal ballot system, which was available for service voters. Who are service voters? Service voters are those who are involved in essential government services and functioning. For example, personnel of the armed forces and security forces. They can't abandon their posts and come and vote, right? Personnel of Indian Army, Indian Air Force, Indian Navy, then personnel of all the paramilitary security forces. They themselves will be involved in securing the elections in different states. So they can't go to their constituency and cast their vote. Government employees who are part of the electoral machinery, they can't cast their vote. Same with Indian diplomats who are stationed abroad, right? In Indian embassies and consulates, they can't leave their work and come back just to cast their vote. So to ensure that they are not left behind, we already had a remote voting system, the postal ballot system, right? So there is a special form that service voters had to fill out. They have to fill out the form and they can use the postal ballot to cast their vote. And these votes are eventually accounted for by the Election Commission. The votes received by postal ballot are counted at the end, and especially if there is a close contest or if there is a very tight contest between candidates, postal ballots might actually play a big role. So those who are involved in essential government services and even other essential categories like healthcare, operation of railways and metro, they are all considered as essential services, right? Even they had postal ballot facility, but it was not available for journalists, because during elections, journalists are very busy covering the elections. They can't go back and vote themselves. So even for media personnel, postal ballot is being extended. So for them, it's not that Election Commission will take the polling booth to their homes, because they'll not be available in their homes. However, through postal ballot, they can cast their vote. So journalists, essential services and service voters, they can continue casting their votes with postal ballots, which has been available from a long time. But this is a new feature. For disabled voters and senior citizens, taking the polling booth directly to their homes is a new feature which is being introduced. It was tried out on a pilot basis, and now it's being rolled out in the general elections across the country. So basically, for this, you have to fill out a form, which is Form 12D, that's available on Election Commission's website. You can download the form, fill it out, and you have to inform the returning officer, the assistant returning officer, and you have to submit this form at the block level booth officer. Now, this is where there is a procedural problem. Even though the form can be downloaded online, after filling it, you have to submit it physically. The concerned person has to be present when the form is being submitted to the returning officer and the booth level officer. So this is a challenge. Now you can't expect senior citizens and disabled voters to come and submit the form themselves. If they can do that, they would go and vote as well in the polling booth, right? So this doesn't make any sense, and that's why the article is highlighting this as a procedural shortcoming. The form is available online, so submission should also be made available online, so that senior citizens and disabled voters can submit the form online itself from the comfort of their home. So this has not been provided as of now. You have to physically go to the returning officer or the booth level officer and submit the particular form. It has to be done within a specified period, and once it is accepted by Election Commission, there will be a small team which will be sent to the house of these voters. There will be 2 polling officials who will come with the EVM itself, and they'll be accompanied by a videographer and a security personnel. They have to follow the rules of conduct of elections of 1961. They will make a visit twice to ensure that the vote is captured. Let's say the voter is not at home, right? So they ensure that they send an intimation first. Through SMS and post, there is an intimation sent that this is the time that the team might arrive. And if they miss the first slot, they will make a second visit. So during the polling hours, the goal is to ensure that this team will visit the house at least twice, right? If it's not captured in the first visit. And they will have to follow the conduct of election rules, which means they have to ensure the secrecy of ballot. They have to ensure that no one is influencing the voter. They should not cast the vote under any undue influence against their choice. This is something they will monitor. That is why there is a videographer. There is a security personnel as well attached to the team. So they will guarantee the secrecy of voting, just like it is done in a polling booth. They will brief the elector first about the process. They'll make them understand about the process, and they have to cast their vote independently without being under any undue influence from family members or someone else. So this ensures the sanctity of the voting process. It protects the integrity of the electoral process. However, those who are blind or those who are suffering from complete physical infirmity, right? For example, someone who has motor inabilities, who can't lift their hand, for example, who can't cast the vote, they can use a companion to assist them. They can nominate a companion to assist them in the voting process. So this is a novel feature that Election Commission is trying out, but of course there are going to be challenges. First and foremost, it creates a huge logistical challenge. Imagine there are almost 16, 17 million voters who have to be reached out, right? Of course, not all of them might register, but still the number will be large enough across constituencies, spread across different geographies. So ensuring that a local polling team reaches out to them, that too twice a day. If they're not available in the first slot, they have to make a second visit. So logistically, this might be challenging. Coordinating between different teams and different operational teams might again be a big challenge. Getting a videographer for every team, a security personnel for every team, right? And ensuring that all the rules, the conduct rules are followed might be a big challenge, which creates logistical and coordination problems. So obviously, this is expected to increase the burden on the election machinery, on the bureaucracy, the officials who are involved in conducting the exercise, right? The workload will increase on them because already they are overburdened, because conducting elections in India, which is the world's largest electoral exercise, is not an easy task. So with this feature, which is highly customized to certain voters, it would pose bigger challenges for the election machinery to ensure that this runs smoothly. Then finally, awareness amongst the eligible voters. Because Election Commission will now have a big task in front of it to make those eligible aware that such a feature is available. The eligible senior citizens, the eligible disabled voters and their immediate friends and relatives, they should at least know that such a feature is available so they can make use of the option. So engaging the media, engaging social media platforms and reaching out to the voters to spread awareness is also equally important. So these are the challenges, and of course there are some procedural shortcomings, but definitely it's a great initiative to ensure that our elections are as inclusive as possible. So you can expect possible mains or prelims questions based on this, and hence the topic is very important. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles. Now let's take a quick look at the prelims articles in today's newspaper. On page number 5, we have an article referring to disaster funding and how it often becomes a controversy between the states and the center. According to the article, the Karnataka government has approached the Supreme Court alleging that the center is discriminating against Karnataka while releasing disaster funds. As you know, Karnataka is going through a severe drought condition. And the Karnataka government, which is ruled by the opposition Congress, has alleged that the ruling BJP at the center is playing politics with disaster funding. It's not releasing adequate funds to support the disaster management efforts at the state level, and hence it has approached the Supreme Court and it has filed a petition under Article 32. It has exercised a writ option, saying that the fundamental rights is being curbed because of the blocking of funds, and Karnataka has been demanding additional funds from the NDRF. So here there are some important points that you need to understand. You need to know what is the disaster management financing mechanisms that are available in the country and what's the process that is followed. See, we have the DM Act, the Disaster Management Act of 2005, that created an institutional structure for disaster management in India. You have the National Disaster Management Authority, State Disaster Management Authority, and a District Disaster Management Authority. So a three-tiered structure was created for disaster management in India. Professional disaster response forces were set up, like your NDRF and SDRF forces, which are specialist professional forces that specialize in search and rescue operations. So apart from creating all these institutions, the Disaster Management Act also provided for the establishment of two dedicated funds. One is NDRF, the National Disaster Response Fund. And there would be a similar State Disaster Response Fund. All right? So this was one set of fund created by the Act, a response fund meant only for immediate response operations. So one at the center called NDRF and a similar fund at the state level. The other fund provided under the Disaster Management Act is the National Disaster Mitigation Fund. A separate mitigation fund has been provided under the Act. Is that clear? So similarly, there would be a state level mitigation fund, a state disaster mitigation fund. So you need to understand what's the difference between the two, what's a response fund and what's a mitigation fund. What's the difference between these two funds? Second, what's the role of the center? What kind of funding does the center provide? Can states ask for additional funding? And what's the process? This is what you need to understand. See, response fund is meant only for response operations, like search and rescue operations that are carried out after a disaster, or immediate aid which is provided, immediate assistance and compensation that is provided after a disaster. Is that clear? So any expenditure incurred on immediate response during disaster and after disaster falls under this category. The money has to come from here. Let's say there is a cyclone, right? And fishermen are caught in the sea. And to rescue them, there will be certain expenses involved in that search and rescue operation. Let's say there are floods, and to rescue the people, to relocate them to a higher ground, to provide them basic food, shelter, medicines, and compensate them for the losses immediately, there will be certain expenses involved. So these are part of immediate expenses. The immediate response expenses are covered under the response fund. Is that clear? Now, the primary responsibility to deal with a disaster lies with a state government. State government has the primary nodal responsibility to carry out response operations. Understood? So initial funding following a disaster is drawn from SDRF. Let's say there is a flood in Kerala or a landslide in Uttarakhand. All right? So in the immediate operations that are carried out during and after the disaster, where assistance is given to the victims, the entire expense is drawn from the State Disaster Response Fund, because states have the responsibility to provide response after a disaster. It's not the center, it's the state. All right? Now, what is the role of these two funds? Why two funds have been set up? And who contributes to these funds? See, NDRF has budgetary allocation. The center can levy special cess, raise additional funds to mobilize money into the NDRF. It's a central fund. Previously, it was the Calamity Contingency Fund. It was restructured as the National Disaster Response Fund. So central government will make a certain budgetary allocation to it, and it will even levy certain special cess through which taxes are collected, and this brings a pool of money, which is NDRF. From here, the funds are distributed to the states. All right? The distribution is 75% for general category states, 90% for special category states. So essentially, NDRF is a supplement fund. So there is a regular allocation that the center would have already made to the states. So general states like, let's say, Karnataka, Maharashtra, they will get 75% of the fund. Let's say Karnataka has a SDRF pool of 1,000 crores. Out of that, 750 crores will come from the center, from NDRF. Remaining 250 crores, Karnataka government has to raise it on its own. Through its own taxes, through its own budget, it has to mobilize the remaining funds. For special states, which are more prone to disasters, the hilly and border states, for example, right? For them, 90% of the funds are given by the center from NDRF to SDRF. Remaining 10% they have to mobilize. Now, what if the fund is exhausted? Because if a state is hit by multiple disasters in a year, like Odisha, Uttarakhand, Kerala, they are highly vulnerable. They might be hit by multiple disasters in the same year. And what if they run out of the funds? What if it's not enough? Then they have the option of requesting additional assistance. Is that clear? States can request. They can send a formal request to the center asking for additional release of funds from NDRF. But it is not automatically released. Center has no obligation to honor the request. The center will consider the request, and the MHA, which is the Nodal Ministry for Disaster Management, will set up an inter-ministerial team. It will draw the top officials, secretaries and top officials from different concerned ministries, and it will constitute an inter-ministerial team. This team will visit the state. They will carry out an inquiry. They will provide a damage assessment. They will assess the impact of the disaster. They will assess whether the funds have been exhausted, whether the funds have been properly spent, and they will come out with a number. Right? They will try to quantify the damage caused by the disaster and submits a report to the Home Ministry. This inter-ministerial team, they will conduct a ground level visit, a ground level inspection. They'll meet the affected people, they'll meet the state government officials, get data from them, right? And then they will try to quantify the damage and give the assessment report to the Home Ministry. Now the decision is left to the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, will consult with Home Ministry and Finance Ministry, and if the center has resources to spare, only then additional NDRF funds are given to the state. Or else, center can deny it as well. Center has the power to deny additional funding. Is that clear? So it's not mandatory, it's not obligatory on the center to provide additional funds. It will provide the fund as stated, 75% to general states, 90% to special category states. But other than that, if SDRF is getting exhausted, states can ask for extra funds and center can later decide based on an assessment whether to provide additional funding or not. But however, this has been controversial. It's been alleged by opposition ruled states that ruling party at the center is discriminating against these opposition ruled states. Because certain states ruled by the same party have easily got additional funds. But few opposition ruled states like West Bengal, then Kerala and others have alleged that center is not providing them additional funds. So same allegation has come from Karnataka as well, and it has approached the Supreme Court in this regard. So apart from response fund, there is another separate fund for mitigation efforts. Mitigation efforts are implemented in pre-disaster phase. That is, before a disaster can occur, you can take up some mitigation measures to reduce the impact of a disaster, like building cyclone shelters, making the buildings earthquake proof, for example, and creating embankments to stop a flood. All these are mitigation measures. To fund such mitigation initiatives in the pre-disaster phase, there is a separate fund, a National Disaster Mitigation Fund and a State Disaster Mitigation Fund. All right? This again follows the same model where center only supplements the state resources. It provides a part of the funding and states have to bring in the rest of the funding. And now the Finance Commission is also playing a role here. If you look at the 16th Finance Commission, which was recently constituted, if you look at its mandate, the terms of reference, it includes recommendations on disaster financing as well. So the Finance Commission, which is a constitutional body, right, has been playing a role. The 15th Finance Commission had some recommendations on disaster financing. 16th Finance Commission will also look into it, and it's playing a role in deciding how the funds will be dispersed from center to states. So these are some basic details you should know about disaster funding in India. Next, there is an important project which is in news from Karnataka and Goa. We have this article on page number 5 that refers to a power project, the Goa Tamnar power project in the Western Ghats. Now, this project was opposed by environmental activists in Karnataka. It's essentially a power line transmission project from Karnataka to Goa, and Goa has been very proactive about this project. But in Karnataka, environmentalists have been opposing it on environmental grounds, and finally, the government of Karnataka has cancelled the project. Because of the environmental concerns associated with the power line project, government of Karnataka has cancelled the license for this project. So let's see where exactly this project was supposed to come up and what was the threat it was posing. This project was coming up partly in the Anshi-Dandeli Tiger Reserve. So that is the topic in news. So you should know where Anshi-Dandeli Tiger Reserve is located. What's this protected area? Where is it? Why is it important? And what threat is posed by such projects? If you remember, yesterday we had a discussion on man-animal conflict. I pointed out that habitat fragmentation through linear projects is one of the major causes for habitat destruction and increasing man-animal conflict. Linear projects such as building of roads, setting up of railway lines, establishing power lines, transmission cables, communication lines, etc. Those are your linear projects that cut right across the forest. When you lay high tension cables, for example, right, or when you build a road or a railway line through a forest area, through a protected area, those are your linear projects that are cutting the forest into two parts. So because of these linear projects, any forest gets fragmented, it gets broken up, and habitat gets disturbed. So this affects the movement of the animals, it increases possibility of man-animal conflict and raises serious environmental concerns. That's why environmental activists oppose such linear projects in critical habitats. So this is one important point. Second point is, where is Anshi-Dandeli Tiger Reserve? It's also called the Kali Tiger Reserve. It's located over here in Uttar Kannada district of Karnataka. It's right along the borders of Goa. This is Goa here. It's part of Western Ghats. It's part of the Sahyadri ranges in Karnataka, and it gets its name from the famous Kali River. It's a west-flowing river. Please remember this point. It's a west-flowing river in the Western Ghats. It drains into the Arabian Sea. It's one of the few west-flowing rivers in India. So Kali River is the lifeline of this protected area. So Dandeli was a wildlife sanctuary and Anshi was a national park. Now both have been declared together as a tiger reserve under Project Tiger. So it's also called Kali Tiger Reserve or Anshi-Dandeli Tiger Reserve. So it is a major tiger habitat. It also has a very healthy population of elephants, crocodiles, and even leopards, and few other threatened species. So it is an important habitat present here in Uttar Kannada district of Karnataka, right along the borders of Goa. Next, we have another important article on the same page related to tea cultivation in Western Ghats. The article is referring to a very popular hill station in Kerala, that is Munnar. Many of you would have heard about it. You might have visited the place as well, right? It's a very popular hill station. Temperatures fall very low over here, and especially during winter, the temperatures can hit 0 to even -1 degrees sometimes. And it's known for frosty conditions in the early morning. In the peak winter from December to Feb, right? Early morning in the Munnar region, the temperatures can drop as low as 1 degree, 0 degrees, and sometimes -1 as well. And these a frost layer gets formed at the ground level. So this region is known for its tea plantations. It's in the Idukki district. So all these places, Tekdi, Munnar, they are very popular tourist locations as well. But here the concern is about the frost affecting the tea plantation. Is that clear? Because frost is not ideal for tea cultivation. Understood? See, in Munnar, for last 2 decades, frost development was very common occurrence. During winter season from December to Feb, every morning a layer of frost would develop on the plants and the grass present at the bottom, at the surface. And this was seen as very bad for the tea plantation. But this time, there is a change. During this winter, tea plantation owners here have noticed that there has been no frost formation at all, which is an indication of a slight change in the climate of the region, in the climate of the Western Ghats. And this is ideal right now. The lack of frost, a frost-free winter, is actually very good for tea cultivation. Is that clear? So that is what is being reported in the article. So take a look at the climatic conditions that are ideal for tea cultivation in India, especially in the Western Ghats. So this part of Western Ghats, including the Silent Valley region in Kerala, then even the Ooty region of Tamil Nadu, and some parts of Karnataka as well, right? This whole area of Western Ghats is a tea hub. It's a tea growing area. So you have a very unique ecosystem present here, and there are certain ideal conditions needed to ensure that the tea plantation crop will thrive. So in the Western Ghats, the plantations are located at a higher altitude, at an altitude of 300 to 2,300 meters, which experiences very heavy rainfall during monsoons. As you know, Western Ghats will get very adequate rainfall in the range of 90 to 750 centimeters, which is much more than the requirement. But ideal condition would be at least 150 centimeters of well-distributed annual rainfall. That's what you need in a hilly area for a tea plantation to thrive. You also need hot and humid conditions. When the plantation is growing, you need an ideal temperature range of 16 to 32 degrees Celsius when the initial saplings are growing. So such a hot, humid environment available during monsoons especially is very ideal for tea plantation. During winters, slight cold is good, but there should be no frost. Frost formation will destroy the tea plantation. So in the Munnar region, every year, hundreds of hectares of tea plantation was getting damaged because of excessive frost formation in the last 20 years. But for the first time in 2 decades, there has been no frost formation, and this has made the farmers and the plantation owners very happy because it will not affect the tea crops. You also need acidic soil with a pH of around 5, and there should be good drainage, meaning the soil should be well hydrated, but it should not clog the water channel. The water should be drained out, and there should be good relative humidity in the range of 40 to 80%. So these are some ideal conditions needed for cultivating tea plantation in Western Ghats. Almost a similar requirement is there in Northeast India towards Darjeeling and Assam. Even there, tea plantation is a major commercial crop. Even there, you have a similar requirement, a similar climatic condition is needed, which is ideal for growing tea crops. Now, coming to the last article for today. Under the economy section, we have this article related to Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves, ISPR. So what is Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves and what is the article referring to? This is something you should understand. See, India, as you know, is very dependent on oil imports. We don't have enough oil reserves on our own. And almost 85% of our crude oil requirement is met through imports. Majority of it, almost 60% of it, comes from West Asian countries. So for many decades, our energy security has been dependent on these oil exporting nations. So be it UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran as well, Venezuela, Nigeria, even Russia right now. All these countries are major oil suppliers to India. Now, problem is, when a country has such an excessive dependency on imports to meet its oil and energy requirement, it becomes a huge hurdle for the country. Because what if there is a disruption in the supplies? Let's say there's a major disruption in the shipping channels. Like, as you know, Red Sea and Strait of Hormuz, they're all facing a lot of disruptions because of what's happening in West Asia. So any disruption to the shipping could affect the supplies to India. Or let's say global economy is collapsing and oil markets have completely shaken up and oil prices have started shooting up. So this will have a direct impact on India. The import bill, the import cost will shoot up and it will increase our current account deficit. So essentially, we become economically vulnerable as long as we are dependent on oil imports. The same is the case with China as well. Even China has a lot of oil import dependency. So what these countries can do is that to shield themselves from any supply volatility, they can create a reserve, a buffer stock. Like China, US, they've all built these massive underground storage facilities where they can store millions of metric tons of crude oil, right? Which can meet their requirement for at least few days, few weeks, or maybe at least a month. So even if there is a major disruption or volatility in the oil market or in oil supplies, right, our energy security will not be affected. We will not be forced to purchase oil at higher prices when prices have shot up. We will not be forced to buy expensive oil during the high market conditions. So if you have a ready buffer stock, which can help you last for, let's say, 10 days or 2 weeks or 1 month, or let's say 2 months, that buffer will help you survive these crisis situations. It will protect your economy's energy security, and you need not pay a higher cost for importing more expensive oil, right? So for example, US has a buffer of at least 30 to 50 days. China has built a buffer of at least 30 to 50 days as well. So India also has a similar project going on, the Strategic Petroleum Reserves Project. It's being implemented by Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited. And in phase 1 of the project, 3 massive underground storage facilities have been built, and you should know where they are located. There is one in Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. There are 2 in Karnataka, in Mangalore or Mangaluru, and Padur near Udupi. They're all strategically located along the coastline of India, right? For example, in Mangaluru, you have petrochemical refineries present. Plus, the port here is well equipped to receive the crude from West Asian countries and to process West Asian crude. So accordingly, these storage facilities have been built. So now we are expanding the program to increase the buffer stock. And under phase 2, 2 more reserves are coming up at Chandikol in Odisha, over here, and a second one at Padur near Udupi. So Padur in Karnataka will have 2 strategic petroleum reserves, one in Mangaluru, one in Visakhapatnam, one coming up at Chandikol. There are 2 more planned towards Gujarat and Rajasthan as well, but as of now, these are the projects which are going on. Phase 1 has already been completed. That gives India a buffer of at least 10 to 14 days. Which means we can survive even without oil imports for at least a couple of weeks, without disrupting our supplies and markets. Once phase 2 is completed, and once we further expand this, we are looking at a buffer of at least 1 month of 30 days, so that we need not forcefully buy expensive oil, right, when there is a disruption or volatility in the markets. We can wait, we can strike better deals, negotiate lower prices, or in the meantime, we can keep drawing from the strategic buffer which is there. So recently, there was a policy change where Indian government, the Ministry of Commerce, it said that we are going to lease out the strategic petroleum reserves to foreign oil companies. India said that foreign oil companies can take our reserves on lease, which will generate revenue for the government. Since we don't have any immediate emergency as of now, plus there are few foreign countries which have helped India in this project, especially UAE and Saudi Arabia. They have been very important partners in the project. Their oil companies have supplied cheap, reliable oil to fill up the strategic petroleum reserves. Like Saudi Aramco and ADNOC of Abu Dhabi, right? They have supplied cheaper oil to India to fill up the strategic petroleum reserves. So recently, India said that we are ready to lease them out as well. Even private oil companies, foreign oil companies can store their oil if they want. So now there is an update. There is a new notification. Foreign oil companies which are storing oil here can export this as well. This was not allowed previously. During normal circumstances, right, foreign oil companies which are leasing the facilities here, storing their oil here, they are allowed to export this but through IOC, through Indian Oil Corporation. But if there is an emergency, let's say there is some oil disruption, right? Then Indian government will exercise the first right. Indian government can stop the oil exports from these strategic petroleum reserves whenever it wants, because this is meant for emergency situations, like a war, for example, or an economic collapse or oil supply disruption. Whenever such a crisis emerges, the government can stop any further exports and government can completely take ownership of all the oil present in our strategic reserves. But during regular times, foreign oil companies like Abu Dhabi's ADNOC, they have been allowed to store and even export from here. They can re-export from here to other countries, but they have to do it through Indian Oil Corporation. So that is a major change. It shows how India is trying to utilize its strategic petroleum reserves, right, while guaranteeing India's energy security. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's The Hindu. Please write down these two questions, mains questions, for your answer writing practice. You can use the points that we have discussed, the structure that I used as well in the discussion, to write answers for these questions. So that is it for today. I hope you guys have liked the session, enjoyed whatever we discussed, and more importantly, I hope you understood everything. If you did, please let me know in the comments. Do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a great weekend.